I'm assuming that we're live.
You are live.
Good. All right. Hi, guys. Have patience. The chef is brilliant. She will be flawless, but you know that my feathers, tech is not my thing. But anyway, this is part of our tribal talk. This is my gathering together bunches of teachers that I know that are wonderful to give us all a little something to scrub our brains out during camp lockdown. So let me tell you about Chef Christy. I have known her for, good Lord, must be 25 years, 30 years. And she is a professional chef. She teaches cooking. I have had the great good fortune to have some of her medieval feasts, which are, oh baby, to die for. And the thing that I love about Christy is she teaches to the whole level. You could be like my mother was in 1946 and she couldn't boil water. And then you have other cooking geniuses, and Christy speaks to all of them. So Christy, I am so thrilled that you're with us today. What are you going to help us do since we're all locked in here looking at our kitchens?
Thank you, Corby. It is a real pleasure to be here. It's just nice to be anywhere.
Yes.
We're going to talk about what we're doing in our kitchens since we're all cooped up at home, and we're going to talk about our pantries and what makes up a well-stocked pantry. Your pantry may be super stocked up right now, or you may feel like it's stocked up with way too much toilet paper or something else, and not enough of other things. So we're going to talk about different areas of the pantry that should be stocked up and what kind of things they should have, and the kind of things that we can cook from those pantry items. We're going to talk a little bit about herbs and spices and creating new flavors from those spices that may have gotten pushed to the back of your spice cabinet until now. And now you're like, okay, well, I've run out of my favorite 2 things that I use all the time. Now what do I do with all this other stuff that's been sitting there? So we're going to make a couple of spice blends. I'm going to make a quick pot of tomato soup from my pantry and talk about the pantry items that go into that soup and how you can adapt it to make what you want out of your pantry. But having that well-stocked pantry is the first part of it, and so that's what we're going to cover.
So where do we start?
Alrighty, well, let me tell folks a little bit about my situation and my kitchen. You see me in my brand new kitchen. I have a 100-year-old house. The next year, this year is actually its 100th anniversary of being a plan and a Sears catalog. So this is an old Sears kit house. I live in downtown Atlanta. And 2 years ago in August, I had a catastrophic house fire. And I lost a lot. Almost everything in the house was damaged, went into storage. Some of my things went into storage, but I had to watch 3/4 of my belongings, including my library that I've been collecting since I was 6 years old, get tossed into a dumpster. So it was very traumatic. And I moved back into my house on March 1st. The timing could not have been any closer. Had I known that this was coming, I would have been under even more stress. It was bad enough as it was. But I started stocking my house the first week of March, just as this was starting to happen and everybody else was stocking. So I'm in the grocery store with the long lines of people with their grocery carts overflowing with stuff. And I'm thinking, but I'm really just trying to stock from bare shelves. So everything that I have stocked up has been in the last month, and that's certainly not the way that my kitchen was prior to that. I had a good storehouse of a lot of things, but I have this document called Your Well-Stocked Pantry that's up on my website, which is askchefchristy.com, as a thank you for giving me your email address. It's a gimme on the website. And so I had that to be able to start from and say, okay, these are the areas that I need to stock up on. So I have taken that and started by stocking up and also figuring out the new places in my kitchen where they're going to go, because the kitchen's not oriented exactly the same way that it was before. So I want to hear your questions. If you see me talking about something and you go, oh, I've got one of those, or I don't have that, what can I make a substitution for that? Please type your questions in. Corby's going to be funneling those questions to me so that I can answer those live during the class. All right, so I'm gonna come grab the phone and turn it around. And I'm gonna walk you through my new kitchen. Okay, so here we go. You get to see my new kitchen. New butcher block countertops and the brand new stove, which is lovely. And there's my pantry shelves. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, like I said, and I discovered a long time ago that if I put my food items out on open shelves, that the bug situation that we have in the South is not nearly as bad. So I go into cabinets with equipment and go on open shelves with my food. And I want to talk about storage items too. Let's just go over here and look at my first shelf. This is grains. Now, see my big flip top glass containers? Some of the bug problems that we have here in Atlanta are Indian meal moths, especially when you buy things in bulk. And they're those little fluffy brown moths that get into your grains and your rice and your beans and just make a mess. So I have discovered that in putting things in glass jars, a jar that only makes a quarter of a turn, like a pickle jar, for example, will not keep those out. You have to go with something that's got a lid on it that will make several turns. That's why mason jar ball jars are so good for that. And I also really like these jars that have the flip top and the gasket, because those keep those kind of insects out too. So on the grain shelf, I've got some oatmeal and rice. I'm gluten-free, so I don't have a lot of wheat products. Because I'm looking at perhaps being quarantined and being ill, I bought myself some ready-made rice things. Because I thought, if I'm not feeling well, I've got a little stock, a little rice, I can feed myself, you know, here by myself. So that's kind of quarantine kitchen stuff that I grabbed. And then up here, we've got the beans shelf. And again, I've gone with these big flip top jars and some other jars that have good screw-on lids, mason jars with those. And then on the very top shelf up there, I've got dried foods. I've got some dried fruits and mushrooms, and those are some puffed cereals. I've got some dried ginger and shallots, some cornmeal. Everything is inside containers, because that's really important if you're going to stock up your pantry. You don't want to feed the little rodents and bugs and things that think your pantry is delicious. Down here, we've got baking items. So again, I said I was gluten-free, so I've made up some gluten-free pastry flour. I've got other types of baking powder, baking soda. That's some cocoa right there. I've got some gluten-free breadcrumbs, some cornmeal mix, some oatmeal. Down on the bottom shelf, I've got the alcohol. You see, I just moved in. I haven't unpacked, not much of a drinker. Got some bottles of mead as presents. I have my pet food in another container, so not only the rodents stay out, but the pets stay out. And then over here, I had really wanted my spices to be all beautiful and organized, but then the pandemic happened and my ability to get all the containers that I wanted for that kind of dried up. So right now you see a mixed bag of spices that I just got for myself. Now we can talk a little bit more about what those are, but basically up here on the top shelf, I have herbs and dried things like dried onion, dried garlic, some powdered things like cumin seed, but most of these are the herbs. Down here on the next shelf, I have my spices and a couple of blends. And then below that, I've got oil and vinegar and condiments like tamari and Worcestershire sauce and cooking oils. Over here, this is my cabinet for canned goods, but I pulled some up here so we can talk about the kind of canned goods. Beans, I like canned beans because they're quick. And if you're trying to put something together and you want to throw some protein into it, one of my favorite things to do when people come to the house unexpectedly is grab a can of black beans, maybe a can of diced tomatoes, and make a quick bean dip. If it's something I want to throw in the food processor real quick or just make it chunky, those are things that you can grab quickly out of a well-stocked pantry and make up food in a really quick hurry. Pickles and olives, things that you want to have in your pantry. I like to keep tahini on hand so that if I want to make hummus of any variety, whether it's with garbanzo beans or black beans or pumpkin, or there's all kinds of things that you get. I saw Alton Brown and his wife were doing a live feed the other night. They made hummus out of roasted carrots. So having tahini or an unsweetened peanut butter, a creamy unsweetened peanut butter will also work for that component if you want to make a dip like that. Canned fruits, applesauce, some coconut milk, canned meats. I'm not much of a tuna fish fan, but I will eat canned white chicken. So I keep that on hand if I need to make a quick chicken salad. And then different types of tomato products. I've got some diced tomatoes and crushed tomatoes. I've got some salsa, and I have a tube of tomato paste. This is the bomb. I know everybody has opened up a little can of tomato paste and then not been able to use it up before it got moldy, right? But this way of packaging in a tube means that it can just sit in the refrigerator. It doesn't go bad. It's good for months, years. Well, maybe I'm not going to go and say years, but definitely months and months after it's opened up, and it never gets cruddy on top and things like that. I've got some barbecue sauce, some salsa. So different types of tomato products depending on different types of foods that you want to eat. And then over here, I've got drawers for dried fruits and nuts and snacks, and then dry or fresh vegetables in dry storage, which can include things like potatoes, sweet potatoes, onions, shallots, garlic, ginger. Now, if you have room to keep these in a refrigerator, that's a good idea. If you have a cool place that you can store them that's not in a fridge, that's a really good idea too. It kind of depends on where you are. If you have something like a sweet onion, like a Vidalia onion, these tend to go bad faster than yellow onions like this. And in Georgia, in about July, when the Vidalia onions are in season, there's a very peculiar habit, peculiar custom of hanging your onions in pantyhose. And you take a pair of pantyhose and you drop an onion down into the leg, and when it gets down to the toe, you tie off a knot. And then you drop another one in, and then you tie off a knot and another one. So pretty soon you get this string of pearls, basically, of onions suspended in a pantyhose, and that keeps the air circulating around them, keeps them from going bad faster. And if you don't have refrigerator space, that's a really good method of keeping these nice and fresh. So these are things that will deteriorate, but they will stay in cold storage. You know, our parents or grandparents used root cellars for this kind of stuff. So it depends on where you live, depends on how dark your area is. You want to make sure your potatoes stay out of the sunlight. If your potatoes start turning green, they've been exposed to too much sunlight and you've got toxins that have developed right under the skin. You want to peel those all the way down till you get to the white part. All right, I think that's everything. I kind of glanced quickly over my supplement counter. Those are all important things to have in your pantry as well. So over here, these are the pantry items that I intend to use to make my soup. I have one fresh thing that I'm going to use because it's going bad in my refrigerator, but everything else is going to come out of my pantry to make this soup. Now, I've posted that recipe. Corby has put it up for us. It's the tomato soup recipe, and it's very delicious. And it does call for some fresh things, but don't consider that recipe a straitjacket. It's a guideline, and the whole point behind cooking from your pantry is not I have a recipe and I don't have one ingredient, so therefore I have to go to the store and buy that ingredient. Well, clearly we're not doing that right now. So you have to know that you can make substitutions, that you can use other things out of your pantry to be able to create the recipe that you want, or something brand new. You don't know, maybe something miraculous will happen and you'll create a brand new dish. Okay, let's see. Let's talk a little bit about some spice blends. Over here, I also posted some spice blend recipes so that you can make blends out of your spice cabinet that you maybe haven't revisited. A lot of people will get a combo pack, for lack of a better word, like a housewarming present or a wedding present. You'll get a spice cabinet that's got 12 pre-filled bottles of spices, and you'll probably use the garlic and the paprika, and maybe you'll use the rosemary one time on chicken, and then you'll go, I don't know what to do with the rest of this stuff. So it sits in the back of your cabinet. Unfortunately, spices do go bad over time, so you do want to use them up, and making spice blends is a really good way to do that. So I've posted those spice blend recipes. This is what I put together for my Mexican spice blend recipe. And this is the one that I put together for a Chinese 5-spice recipe. Now, I know your recipes. Here real quick. Check my recipes. You get to look at my brand new refrigerator, who I'm very enamored of, for a second. There we go. Okay. So the recipe for the chili powder involves paprika and cumin and cayenne and oregano and onion powder and garlic powder. But now,
Christy,
yes, ma'am.
When you do that, some people may not know what these spices look like. So could you point to them and say, this is cumin, blah, blah, blah.
I will.
Good.
I will. But what I was going to say is, I don't like hot, spicy things. I'm a real spice weenie. So I don't like to put the chili powder in my chili powder. So instead of that, I just put in a little extra paprika. So this is my paprika, and this is a smoky paprika. And I like that flavor for a Mexican food, for a taco seasoning blend, for example, for chili, because the smoky flavor adds depth to that flavor. And then this is dried flaked oregano. No, really, officer, it's oregano, I swear. And this is powdered cumin. Now, I really like cumin, and I know people who think it smells like body odor. So it's kind of like the cilantro thing. You love it or you hate it. So if you don't want to put cumin in your chili seasoning, this is your opportunity to leave it out, just like I've left out the hot chili, because I don't want to use that. This is some granulated garlic, and this is some onion powder. So those are the things that I have decided I'm going to make my chili powder with, based on what I've got on my shelf, because I can't run out and get anything new. So to do that, I'm going to take a bowl, and I've already measured these out, and I put measurements down on those recipes. Again, the measurements are just guidelines. If you want to use more of something or less of something, it's entirely up to you. You're in the privacy of your own home. Nobody's going to come and say, what do you mean you put cinnamon in your chili powder? That might be really good. Okay. Here we go. Let me grab a spoon real quick. And there we have it. My own custom blend. Now, if I wanted to make this into taco seasoning, I would do that by adding a little cornstarch to it. Because, you know, when you open the taco seasoning packet, you throw it in with your ground meat, and then you add water and you let it thicken up. It's because it's got cornstarch in there. So I can make my own. I can throw a little cornstarch in there. I can use whatever ground meat or tofu or tempeh or whatever I'm using for my taco meat, and create my own blend to my taste. If I am on a salt reduced diet, I can add no salt to it at all. If I want to add something else, I can. But that is my own special blend without any chili pepper in it, of a chili seasoning blend. And that was all stuff that I had on my counter. Now, what do you do when the recipe calls for something that you don't have? For example, this Chinese 5-spice blend that I posted says it blends equal parts of ginger, cinnamon, anise, cloves, and 1 or 2 others, which could include star anise, black pepper, Szechuan pepper, mustard, nutmeg, garlic, even dried tangerine peels, orange or lemon zest, which is a fantastic list. But I didn't have all of those things in my kitchen. And I imagine you don't have all those things either. And I got a question before the class started by somebody who said that their wife was allergic to cloves. So could they just use more allspice or something else? And I said, yeah, sure. You can double up on the allspice, or you can put something else in, or just leave it at altogether. Again, nobody's going to come and tell you you're doing it wrong if you only put 4 spices in your 5-spice powder. So what did I have? I didn't have anise and I didn't have cloves. So I had to kind of make some substitutions here. So what do I have? I have ground ginger. Right, everybody knows that ground ginger. That's nice and lovely. It's kind of powdery. I have some cinnamon, lovely. I think this is Vietnamese cinnamon that I bought. I used some nutmeg, which is one of the alternates, not usually in the main rotation. And I really should have some allspice powder, but I just don't. So then I was kind of stuck. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I don't have these other things. So I went with a couple of other ideas. I had some granulated lemon peel. That's one of those things you buy to make something at Christmas time, and it gets shoved to the back of the cabinet. And what the heck do you do with it now? Well, I thought ground lemon peel would probably be a really nice flavor for this Chinese 5-spice. And then I was really stuck. Well, I don't have anything else on that list. What am I going to use? So I decided to use some cardamom. Now, if you haven't seen cardamom, this is a cardamom pod. And if you like your chai tea, you already know about cardamom pods. When you steep them, they give a lovely flavor to your tea. And you get these little pods. Break one up here. There you go. Get these little pods that come out of them. And then when those are ground up, they make this kind of beige flecked powder. So my Chinese 5-spice is going to be ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, granulated lemon peel, and cardamom. And I can already tell you, it's too bad we don't have smell-o-vision, because I can tell you right now that this is just an amazing smell already. So I'm going to go ahead and mix my things together. Now, one of the things that says in the recipe is that if you're going to use cloves, you use half. You use equal parts of everything and then half of the amount of cloves, because cloves are darned strong. And if you start playing around with other things, you may find that that's true too. So you always want to, err on the side of caution when you're mixing something. And then add more. And a good way to test it is to mix it with a little butter. Fats will bring out the flavors in the spices really well. And so if you just take a little bit of this and mix it with a pat of butter and then spread it on a cracker or something neutral tasting like bread, you can get an idea of your blend and how things are working. If you've got a flavor in there that needs to be more pronounced, then you can add that. So there's my Chinese 5-spice blend with my, what I could find off of my shelf. I didn't worry about the fact that I couldn't make it according to recipe, because I'm here in my quarantine kitchen and I had to go with the things that I was able to use. All right, so there's my spice blends. Got my Mexican spice blend and I've got my 5-spice blend, and I really, really at this point would stop, grab a bag, label the bag,
put the blends in the bag or the bottle and make sure that I didn't leave spice blends sitting around unlabeled, because those both look very similar, don't they? If I just came up here and asked you visually to tell me which one of those was which, would you be able to do it? No. Now, if I asked you to smell them, you could totally tell the difference, but you don't have that kind of smell vision right now. So I need to make sure that they're labeled, and I will do that once the class is over, but I don't want to take the time to do it right now. But labeling what you've put in it, you know, since I made this with a bunch of different things and it wouldn't be normal, I would totally label each individual ingredient that went into that spice blend so that I could use it. Now, what is Chinese 5-spice blend good for? Stir fries and rice, and oh, it's especially good with soy sauce and a little honey for chicken wings. So that's a really good, it's pretty much my go-to anytime I do a quick stir fry, is I put a little pinch of 5-spice and call it good. And then we just said all the Mexican flavorings that you can use that for tacos and chili and, you know, anything that you're going to do in that realm of cuisine. Alrighty. So what I want to do now is start making my tomato soup. Let me turn this around. Hold on. Hey, we're back. Okay, so I'm going to put this over. No, I want to do one more thing. I want to talk about my ingredients. Sorry, going back. Come back. There we go.
You're good.
I'm not there. Okay. All right, back over to my ingredients here for my tomato soup. So this Minestra di Pomodoro involves olive oil, minced garlic, and for this, I didn't even go into the refrigerator to show you the things in here, the pickles and olives. For this, I'm going to use this garlic because I really like these products to have things on hand that might tend to go bad. I like their lemongrass for making Thai soup, and I really like their ginger. It's just really cool to have those kind of products on hand when you need them if you don't have the fresh stuff. So I'll put that garlic over there for right now. And I'm going to use a can of tomatoes. Now, my new kitchen is not as equipped as it needs to be, and I don't have an immersion blender or a Vitamix yet. I have one coming, but I don't have it yet. So I didn't want to use diced tomatoes and juice. So instead of that, I opened a can of crushed tomatoes. Remember a minute ago, I was talking about using different types of tomato products, having different types of tomato products available. So I'm going to use these crushed tomatoes for my soup so I don't have to use the immersion blender to make it smooth. And then I'm going to use chicken stock because I don't have any beef or veal stock on hand. I have concentrates, but I'm happy enough with chicken stock. For me, I'm good with that. And then I'm going to use a spice blend. That's my spice blend. I have salt, pepper, sugar, and a little Italian seasoning blend because the recipe calls for fresh basil. I don't have fresh or dried basil, but I had a bottle of Italian seasoning blend. So I have added that to my mix. And then instead of chopped fresh garlic, I've got a chopped shallot. And then that roll right there is some fresh parsley, which was in my drawer getting old and wilty. So I thought, sure, I can add that to my soup. All right, so now I'm going to put you back over here. There we go. Fantastic. Okay, are we good? Can we see everybody? Everybody see me?
Yep.
Alrighty, so super simple. And here's the other thing about this recipe. I'm here by myself. I don't need a quart of tomato soup. So I'm gonna have this recipe and just make enough for me to have a couple of portions out of it. So I'm gonna use a small stock pan. Put it on the stove. And put that on a low heat because I don't want to scorch anything. And then I'm going to take my chunky garlic. And a little bit of olive oil. And at this point, you're going to stop seeing me measure things. I did all that lovely setup for all the spice blends. I cut up all of the shallot and everything. That is the end of my measuring. People get really, really attached to measurements and they want to know exactly how much goes in something. Now, if you are baking, that is absolutely important. You have to have the exact ratios in order for your chemical reactions to occur. When you're cooking, it's not nearly so important unless you get way out of proportion with your ratios. Obviously, if you use way too much salt, it's going to be ruined. But you don't have to worry so much about, well, exactly how much did you just put in there? I just put about that much in there. That's how much. Did it look like enough to me? It did. Was it enough for you? Maybe not. You may need to put more or less depending on your personal tastes. So I've got my garlic in there. I'm going to let that come to where I'm hearing a sizzle. And I'm going to add my chopped shallots. Bring those up one real close. There we go. My chopped shallots are ready to go. And I chop those fairly fine because, again, I'm not going to blend this. If you have an immersion blender or if you have a blender that you feel comfortable with blending it up to make a nice smooth soup, you can do that. You can add cream to this later on if you want to make a cream of tomato soup. I'm going to come over here and wash my hands. Everybody should know this routine by now. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. All right, seconds. A little variation on the ABC song. Happy birthday, whatever you're singing to yourself. Keep those. Hear my sizzle. All right, so I've got my garlic and my shallot in there. I'm going to add my tomatoes. And remember, I'm using the crushed tomatoes here. And I'm using a 14-ounce can. The recipe calls for 4.5 cups. So if I were going to do the full recipe, I would use more than this. And 14 ounces is not 2 cups. It's not quite 2 cups. Am I going to open a second can of tomatoes? No, I am not. I'm not going to worry about that little variation. In fact, if I'm too worried about it, I could add a couple of ounces of water, just rinse out my bowl. And there, I've made up the difference of the can not being quite 2 cups. Right. And I'm going to bring that to a boil and let it simmer for a few minutes. And then I'm going to add stock and my salt, pepper, and sugar and my Italian seasoning mix. And I'm going to let that cook for about 20 minutes, 15 minutes. I want to be able to have a serving of it before the end of this class. And then I'm going to add a little chopped parsley at the very end. This is the parsley that I had in my drawer in my refrigerator, and it's starting to look a little limp, but this will be really perfect for that. So I've got my broth and my balsamic vinegar, and all of my seasonings are already in my little pre-measured bowl there. So I'm going to put my broth. There we go. So I'd love to hear your questions. Who's got some questions about their pantry, about what they have in their pantry, what they might need to substitute for something in their pantry?
All right, one of the things that I would be interested in is tomato soup can be a very basic thing. So before you would add in the specific things that would make it Italian, is it a base stock and then you could flavor it for Armenian or Thai or something like that, depending?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I'm adding Italian seasoning blend, which is a variation on this recipe anyway, because it calls for fresh basil. I don't have any fresh basil, so I'm going to go ahead and use an Italian seasoning blend because that's something I have on my shelf right now. If you wanted to do something different with it, then absolutely, the seasonings are completely up to you. All right, so I've got a little bubbling going on right now, so I'm going to go ahead and add my stock. Note how carefully I am not measuring that. Okay.
One of the other questions we've got for you is going back to when you talked about you can't keep spices forever. Is there a particular time?
Yes.
2 months, 4 months, 6 months,
Very
and
good question.
differ?
All right, I'm adding my about a tablespoon or so of balsamic vinegar to that, maybe a teaspoon and a half, and my seasoning blend. Stir all that in. Oh, that smells so good already. Okay, so spices. How long can you keep your spices? If you have a whole spice. Oh, look, I have cloves. Bear with me while I grab a couple of examples. Okay. Here I have some cinnamon chips. This was all they had. I would have bought the big sticks, but they didn't have it when I went to the market. So I got these cinnamon chips. These are still basically a whole spice. In this form, they will last, depending on how thick they are, but I would go years on this cinnamon stick. I have had cinnamon sticks hang around in my kitchen for years and they're fine. If you're gonna steep them long-term in something, it just doesn't matter how old they are. So a whole spice like this is gonna last on average 2 years. If it's smaller, here's a clove. Cloves are gonna stay good for a really long time. As we already discussed, cloves are very, very potent. And they stay really strong for a long time. Fun fact, if you have a toothache, since my dentist is closed and basically you can't go to the dentist right now, if you have a toothache, you can put a clove in your mouth right up against the sore tooth and it will create a numbing effect. In fact, if you go to the drugstore right now and look for a toothache kit, you're gonna buy oil of clove. And it's basically that same thing, and it has this lovely numbing effect. Here's something fun you can do with your kids. Give them a whole clove and have them put it on their tongue and wait to see how long it takes for their tongue to go numb. Ha ha! That's fun. At-home science experiments. So whole spices, a couple of years. Depending on the spice, you might get more than a couple of years out of it, but at least 2 years. If it's something small and whole, like these are caraway seeds, which I love, love, love in my sauerkraut, right? Cabbage dishes, rye bread, lots of fun things with brassicas you can do with caraway seeds, also some sweetbreads. These tiny little seeds are whole, but they will eventually lose their flavor. So maybe a year on a tiny little whole seed like that. Now, once you have ground them up, this is ginger. Now, this is a root, a rhizome, right? Once you've ground it up and you've got a powder like this, you're looking at 6 months. You should have, don't buy more ground spice than you can go through
in 6 months. If you go through a lot of ginger, I go through a lot of ginger. I go through a lot of garlic. I go through a lot of cumin. So those are things that I buy a fairly large amount of ground because I know I'm just going to use them up that much. If I want to just have it on hand, I would buy it in its non-ground form and then either grind it up with my electric spice grinder or my mortars and pestles and do it fresh right then when I want to use it. The exception to the whole thing is, now those are spices. And these are herbs. Now, whole herbs, this is dried chives. So those are an onion. Those are going to stay good for probably a year or two. They might lose a little of their flavor, but use a little bit more of them and you're okay. Now, onions are a very potent flavor, as opposed to, this is dried parsley. Parsley doesn't have a lot of flavor to begin with in its dried form. So if you let that go for more than a month or two, couple of months, maybe let's say 3 months on dried parsley, it's just gonna turn into straw. It'll not taste like much of anything. And dillweed is probably the finest of the herbs. And you can tell when dillweed starts losing its flavor and efficacy because it turns brown. It will just lose this beautiful green color and it will just turn brown. And you've got, I'd say 3 months on dillweed. You've got the dilly dip, my dilly dip recipe that I posted, which is one of my favorite things to put in eggs or fish.
Okay.
It's got dill and parsley and onion salt and garlic salt, and that's on that page of recipes that I posted. This stuff is fantastic, and this is one that I use. And if you are, don't need salt, you can do it without salt. But when I'm doing a quick scrambled egg in the morning, I just sprinkle a little of this in it, and it's fantastic. So this is one of my favorite spice blends to use. I almost didn't post it because I thought the chances of you having fresh dill that was in good shape in your pantry was probably not that great, but it's still one of my favorites. So I thought I would throw it. And if you do have dill in one of those jars and you don't know what to do with it, this is a really good way to do that.
Okay, we have 2 more questions coming in. Okay. Catherine says, all my herbs are old. What would be a list of basic herbs to restock as a beginner? And Katie says, what about freezing ground spice? So those are the 2 we have right now.
Freezing ground spices. Well, freezing your herbs and spices is definitely a way to preserve them, get a little bit more life out of them. So you can totally do that. Best if they're not ground, because you'll get more life out of the whole herb or whole spice. But if you've got them ground, then yeah, you can totally put them in the freezer and get a little bit more life out of them that way. Now, if you have, so the first question was that she had a bunch of old herbs and not what to do with those, but what are basics to get started with?
To restock. Yeah, she's tossing the old, she wants to start fresh.
Okay. Well, I have a really long class about that. It's a really tough one to just roll off. But it depends on what you do. It depends on the things that you cook with. But okay, let me see what I can do right off the top of my head. I used fresh bay leaves and dried bay leaves that are fresh to make stocks with. A fresh bay leaf actually has flavor. The ones that have been sitting on your counter for 3 years or more don't have any flavor. It's just more symbolic to throw one of those in a pot of stock than anything else. So fresh bay leaves. Dillweed. I really love the flavor of fresh dill. Basil is nice if it's fresh when fresh dried. It is another one that doesn't retain its flavor very long. I like to have oregano on hand. Parsley and thyme for sure. Trying to run through my herbs. Let me turn around and look and see what I bought here just recently. Let me walk over here for a second. So in addition to the ones I've already talked about, what else have I got over my, I've got caraway seed and celery seed, dill seed, fennel seed, oregano,
On my spice shelf, in addition to the cumin and cardamom that I've already talked about, I've got fennel seed, I've got mustard seed, ground mustard, and pumpkin pie spice, paprika. Got 3 different kinds of paprika, it seems. Turmeric, or doing any kind of Indian food, or if you're just wanting to add those extra antioxidants into your food. If you like a lot of Italian flavors and you work with maybe even Greek flavors, you might like marjoram or summer savory to add to your blends. I like to use oregano in my Greek spices for things like that. I would say that if this was Katie who asked this?
No, this is Catherine.
Catherine, I have a very long list that I'd be happy to share with you. If you want to hit me up with an email, then I can send that.
Okay. Would you like to tell people your email, please?
Yes, my email is Chef Christy, ChefChristy @King's Taste, KINGSTASTE.com.
While you're stirring there, how else can people work with you? Where can they find things that are about you? This is when you get to talk about you while the tomatoes are bubbling away.
Okay, my website is askchefchristy.com. And if you would like the well-stocked pantry document, when you sign on to askchefchristy.com, if you'll scroll down to the bottom where it says the shop, click on that, and you'll see the sign up to get the well-stocked pantry. It says it's the shop. It doesn't cost anything. Just give me your email address and you will get the PDF of the well-stocked pantry. And that will go over all of those different areas that I just covered when I walked around my kitchen. If you want to like me on Facebook, I'm at Chef Christy-ATL. So that's ChefChristy-ATL. And you can always like that page and shoot me a message through Facebook. Or send me an email at chefchristy@kingstaste.com. Okay. And I'm happy to share, always happy to answer questions. My long-term clients and friends have not been shy about checking in with me and trying to figure out how to cook stuff and what to do, and sending me photos of, I have this thing, what do I do? Does this look okay? And that's definitely something that you have to consider when you're going through quarantine like this. You have to use things up. You have to use the fresh things first. I have a stocked freezer full of food. Not only I did buy a couple of gluten-free pizzas, but mostly what I've stocked in my freezer are portions of meals that I've created and then put a portion aside. So it's already ready to go. And I'm holding off on using any of those because if we get to the point where we are having food shortages, which I don't really anticipate so much, although certain things could certainly go out of stock, like we're seeing with toilet paper, right? Then I have those things to fall back on. So I want to use my fresh things first. My root cellar refrigerator has got squashes and onions and sweet potatoes and things like that. I'm going to use those up second. Then I will go to things in my freezer, and then beyond that, then I go to my canned goods and my dried goods. So I'm working my way through to make sure that I'm using the things that need to be used first, the freshest things first. And that's something you kind of have to rotate your pantry, rotate your foods to make sure that you do that. And so the things that you've stocked up on don't go to waste. You want to make sure that when I went to get my box of stock, I looked at the expiration date and picked the one that was the soonest so that the other ones on the shelf are good longer. All right, I'm going to taste my soup here. Mm. That's good. Nothing that a little extra time wouldn't hurt, not time to spice, but time on the stove. I'm gonna go ahead and chop up my fresh parsley, add to that. Any other questions we've got?
What is the thing that people have to unlearn the most that you find people do and you keep wanting to say to them, no, you don't need to do that, or that's not going to help you?
The whole thing about I have to run to the store to get this one item to finish this recipe. That I never do that. It's like a point of pride. If I can't finish I mean, obviously, if my main thing, like if I'm gonna make fried chicken, not that I make fried chicken, but a chicken dish, and my chicken is bad, then I might have to run to the store to get something else. And I've touched my face, I have to wash my hands up. But I could also look in my freezer and see what other protein is available, so I didn't have to rush to the store to get something. And people get very, very hung up on, it's written in the recipe, therefore I must use it. And this especially, this situation especially, really has to break us out of that, because we can't just run to the store every day and get, so we shouldn't be running to the store every day to get stuff. I have managed to do once a week, and I'm good if I can't go that often. So if you feel like I want to make something, but I don't have all the ingredients to that, and you look in your cabinet and go, but I could substitute this for that, you've opened up a whole new world of possibilities, and you've stopped being constrained by what somebody else wrote in a time, in a different place, a different time, different set of needs. So that would be the one thing. I had a gentleman once in a cooking class who was an engineer. There was an engineering firm that had come to this class, and he was unable to continue. And I looked at him and I said, sir, what's the matter? Can I help you? And he said, what does this mean? Season to taste. And I said, well, you season it. He said, well, how do I know? Whose taste? And he was absolutely paralyzed by that part of the recipe because he didn't know how to go on. And I was like, it's to your taste. And he's like, well, how do I know if that's right? Well, you're going to eat it. So if it tastes good to you, then that's what you want. Okay, so I'm going to add my parsley here, my one fresh ingredient. I'm gonna quick throw some bread and cheese in here. Go. I'm gonna let that come up to a point. Just
Tell me when you're ready for another question, Christy.
I'm ready.
All right. Aylin says, I tend to cook too many proteins. How can I use leftover pork and beef roast?
Okay, so this is a really good question. I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and she said, no matter how much I cook, even if I think that I'm cooking enough for 2 meals, there's never enough left over for the second meal. And I said, well, one of the things that you can do is portion it before you serve the first meal. Cook it, cut it in half, put that second half aside, and let that first portion be what's there for the meal, and make, have people eat other sides. They tend to want to pick at the protein and ignore the other side dishes that you have created to go along with it. Having little containers that you can portion things into the refrigerator, like I really like lock and lock containers that create that kind of seal. Those are fantastic, and you've got different sizes of those. If you cook your proteins up, if you want to get really specific about it, you can get a scale and you can measure out 4-ounce portions, and you can put those 4-ounce portions in individual containers in the refrigerator. And then if you want to make a stir fry or an omelet or a quick burrito or something, you've got those portions of cooked meat to go. You can always cut up pieces of cooked meat to do stir fries, to do casseroles, to do soups, tacos. Everybody loves tacos. You can throw any kind of meat on a taco. So those would be my first go-tos if I had some extra protein, didn't know quite what to do with it. You can always chop up different kinds of protein. Things like Brunswick stew, for example, are soups made from leftover proteins. You've got chicken and pork, squirrel, you know, if you're doing it traditionally. Not that you probably got a lot of leftover squirrel in your fridge. I know I'm fresh out of that myself, but the whole idea behind the necessity to make that kind of soup is a bunch of leftover stuff. I've got this many lima beans. I've got one tomato. I've got a chicken leg, and I've got, you know, a leftover burnt end. All of those things go together to make one kind of soup. So if you're just truly looking at a bunch of menagerie kind of items, those types of soups, and if you don't want to just make refrigerator surprise soup, you can look up recipes for things like Brunswick stew, burgoo, goulash, things like that, where they take a lot of different types of leftover ingredients and create something new out of them. A lot of people tell me they don't like leftovers. And one of the ways that you can avoid leftover flavor is not to package everything together. So keep your vegetables packaged separately, your meats packaged separately, your sauce packaged separately. And then when you go to reheat them, heat them up together, you know, on a plate, but they haven't been melding their flavors. You don't have the broccoli sitting next to the chicken, sitting next to the mashed potatoes in one container, getting homogenized flavors amongst them. So you can package them individually and then reassemble them on a plate, and you'll get nice fresh flavors when you go to cook them.
Okay. And now for something completely different. Katie wants
Okay.
to know how to prepare fiddleheads.
Fiddlehead ferns,
Yes.
right? That's the question, fiddlehead ferns? Saute them, quickly saute them in some olive oil is the only way I know how to do that. Or, no, I mean, I guess there's other ways, but that would be my first.
Is there a particular way to wash them? To, you know, it's like when you're cooking collards, you have to get rid of that tough stem.
I would soak fiddleheads and submerge them, because if they've got grit tightly curled up in the little head of the fern, that's where you'd have problems. So if you soak them and kind of gently agitate them, you should be able to get most of that out of there. All right, I'm gonna pour myself a little soup. And that's really pretty with my, oh, and that fresh parsley really adds a nice aroma to that soup. Fresh parsley, flat leaf parsley has flavor. Curly leaf parsley doesn't really have flavor. Stop. Shh, shh, shh. Okay, there we go. All right, so the other day I made a video and made some Irish soda bread. So I took a little of my Irish soda bread and melted a couple little pieces of cheese on that so that I could have that with my soup. Come here, do this one more time. All right, so there's my soup with its kind of chunky appearance. It's got my crushed tomatoes, my diced shallots, and my chopped up parsley. I even have a little more parsley I could just, there we go, just to make it look fancy. And my soda bread with some cheese on it. And that's all made out of my pantry. And things that you can make out of your pantry too. All right, just back up one more time.
There we
Go.
All right.
We're free, folks. You get interesting camera views because we are not professionals at this whole videography thing yet. There we go. Okay, so I've got my beautiful tomato soup made. Let me give that a try. Mmm. Mmm. That's a really good quarantine snack.
Okay, a last question. So those of us who have too much time on our hands, like everybody, if we wanted to start growing our own fresh herbs, what are good ones to start with?
I would try and grow some flat leaf parsley. You'd be surprised at how flavorful that is. And it's fairly good for like small window boxes. There are certain types of thyme that have small, little compact and dense growing clumps that you can contain in a small window garden. And a lot of people want to put chives in their window gardens, which is great until the chives want to spread out and take everything over. By your second season, I think your box would definitely be nothing but chives. But those are good because those are one of the things that you can just snip off the top and they keep growing. Basil needs a lot of sun and a lot of room. And one of the things that we discovered with basil last year is that there's a new mold that's invading because of warmer temperatures. And so you have to get the right kind of basil. So I wouldn't suggest that for a starting off point for a herb garden. Dill is very big, so that would require sunshine and a big garden space. What else goes really well? Mint needs its own pot and an armed guard to stay to keep it inside its pot. Oregano is a nice little small, it will spread if you give it a lot of room and it wants sun, but it would do pretty well in a small herb plot or herb garden. So some parsley would be a really good start, and some chives in a separate area, mint in a separate area, oregano and thyme. Those would be the ones that I would start with.
Okay. This has been such fun.
Good.
Pottering in a kitchen with a friend, and this is about as close as we're going to get.
That's true.
So, again, tell people how to find you, where they and the kinds of things that you can help them learn.
Well, you know, now that we are in this quarantine situation, I think what we're going to be doing is going to change on everybody's front. So I think we're going to start doing some online cooking classes. I've done a couple of cooking videos. This is my first cooking class online, so I'm hoping this goes really well. It has gone well so far. And to be able to do one-on-one with people in their kitchen so that I can see what they're doing and say, okay, I see what you've got there. You need to trim a little over here. I think that's going to be really handy and a platform that we're going to just be starting on. So I'm working my way through understanding Zoom. We're using a combination of Zoom and Facebook Live here today. So my website's askchefchristy.com. My Facebook page is chefchristy-ATL. My email address is chefchristy@kingstaste.com. You can get in touch with me any of those ways. And if you want to work out something to do an in-home cooking class with you and your kids, or you just need to show me a live video of what's in your pantry and say, help me, what do I do here? We can work something out with those things. I'm sure we will be coming up with all kinds of new and innovative ways to do cooking classes now that we are living the remote lifestyle.
I may take you up on half a dozen of those.
Okay, great.
But anyway, thank you so much, Christy. Thank you all of the tribe for tuning in today. Stay tuned. We have more Tribal Treasure classes coming to you for as long as we're all staring at social media, because we're not allowed to stare at each other.
Right.
So thank you, Christy. Have a great Sunday, everybody, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.